Meeting to order of the Parks Board. We'll start with the roll call.
Linda Kolthoff.
Keith Cecil.
Rhonda Ankney.
Roger Hitz.
And everyone will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, did everybody have a chance to review the minutes from last week's meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we do have a guest here. Chuck from Layman and Layman will be here to talk about our RIF assessment. So we'll go ahead and
Introduce or do you? Okay, good. Thank you. What I passed out tonight is the full document, which is in the bound set, and then the stapled portion is the presentation, which I'm going to go through tonight. This is going to be the same presentation we're going to be presenting at a public hearing with the Plan Commission after this meeting. And then on the 30th, we're going to be coming back for the town council, a two-reading process. So just some background information on this. This is, are you controlling it or do I?
I can, but that will
Okay,
control.
all right, good, boy, great. What we've done is, this is the this is the first update to the impact fee study. The last one was done 4 or 5 years ago, 2017. Just a background, the state statute requires that the impact fee study looks at a 10-year projection of growth, but the ordinance that actually incorporates that into action can only last no more than 5 years. So the intent is that we, and the other caveat into that is that after the approval of the ordinance, the municipality cannot start collecting on that impact fee for that ordinance for a period of 6 months. So what we do is try to organize this in such a way that you approve, that the town will approve this. You'll still be collecting during those 6 months off the old ordinance, and then this one will kick in, so there won't be a gap in between. So, so this is an update to that study. And part of the requirements is to actually form an advisory committee, which is part of the state statute. And I'd like to thank those who participated in that. The makeup of the advisory committee needs to have a certain percentage of that represented into the building community, the real estate community, and also the developer aspect on that. So you get some liaisons into those other areas. So these were the list of the committee members for that, and thank them. The impact fee formula that goes into that, you determine an impact cost, which I'll show how that was developed. You subtract off that impact cost any non-local revenues and impact deductions. Non-local revenues are like donations, and impact deductions would be, and I'll demonstrate where that is in this study then too. You take that number and divide it by the number of projected residential building permits over the next 10-year period, and that determines your impact fee. Is that? I mean, it's simple to narrative. It's difficult to describe otherwise. The part of this is also looking at a community level of service standards. So if you look at this is two different projections. The current would be like a snapshot of today, and then the future would be a snapshot of what's projected in the next 10 years. So in that illustration on the current element on the upper left, that would represent your current population And again, we use the census data for 2020 as part of that, and along with any projections. You balance that against your current inventory. So that tree and whatever would represent that inventory. The recreation standards is the pivot point on that. And in this illustration, it's showing that you have more population than you have inventory of infrastructure. So that wedge of brown would represent a current deficiency on that. In the future, part of this study also looked at what that 10-year growth would look like. There's going to be new homes, new building permits. You may even add on more inventory. But in this illustration, you're taking the same recreation standards, that pivot point. And in this illustration, it's showing that that wedge of green would represent dollars that could be collected from that future needs based on impact fee dollars. So there is a current efficiency aspect, and there's also that future needs aspect as we progress through this. Some of the residential building permit history, you can see these are just residential building permits for Bargersville. The major upswing in the last several years of what that looks like. Years ago, 23, 20, building permits a year, and now we're looking at over 200 of that, and is projected to continue at that pace. So something like this here is going to, this type of study and this type of funding is going to provide a funding resource that's unique to Bargersville, and something that basically is an entry fee per se for folks moving in to maintain a level of service. What we looked at is a study of looking at development parcels, and also parcels that were development parcels 5 years ago, and they actually have turned into actually developments at this point. So this map is way too small to describe or detail, but we did this on a parcel by parcel basis. What we've done is also looked at a database that takes each of those parcels. We look at the land use, what the density for residential development would be, and do a projection of what that build out would be for each of those parcels. So anything that's a parcel that doesn't have a development name tied to it is still a development parcel. Anything that actually was a parcel before and has actually progressed into a development, we've acknowledged that on this page and have another table of that, which is actually shown there, which gives projections of what that build out would be for that next 10 years. So in the previous slide and in this slide, you'll see a column of blue percentage numbers. Those would represent what is projected to be built out in the next 10 years and what that number of building permits and population would actually be. That all in a summary form would look like this here. Currently, the 2020 population for Bargersville is 9,560. With the projection of both the parcel development and also the existing developments built out in the next 10 years, there'd be an additional 5,600, my glasses are getting foggy, 5,650 persons, or 280 or 2,085 building permits in that next 10-year period. So that will be something that we would look at, and that would be the projected 2020 population of 15,210 people. So adding, 5,600 people in that next 10-year period is part of that growth projection. Interesting, when we looked at all the elements, all the parcels, and this would be the third column over, the build out based on zoning and based on that, those percentages would actually add up to 28,000 people. So about 20,000 more people than are here at this point. So that provided us with a projection on population. What we did here is then take that 10-year projection and actually prorate that out over those next individual years. So from 2021 up to 2030, we're projecting out what that population growth would be and the number of building permits for each of those years. So this is just some of the logic behind that. But they'd be looking at a 4.75% growth per year with that population. How we're looking at inventory, and where this is the park inventory, we've got your existing parks and park land. That's part of that mix. We've also acknowledged anything that was a trail or greenway that actually occupied land and acknowledged that as part of that open space as well. So right now we're doing an inventory that there's just a little bit less than 30 acres park inventory or acreage within the town system itself. Excuse me. One of the things that we look at is about 35 different recreational infrastructure components. And again, the table's too small to read. But what we've done is labeled what is found within the park system, what's found within the schools, and also the last 3 columns there would represent park inventory or recreational inventory of other recreational providership, within the study area. We do that purposely because if someone is providing, say, softball fields that are meeting the community need, but they're not part of your park system, it doesn't mean that you're short on softball fields because you're not providing them. Someone else is providing that resource. We also note the schools in this case, so that the schools, if they have a facility that is open, even if it's open part-time to the public, we want to acknowledge that as well. So it gives more of a snapshot of what is providing as far as recreational infrastructure. So the middle columns there under what's labeled as parks would represent that inventory of that infrastructure. We go on to the next one. Part of this is, and again, this is in the study document. There's state standards as far as what the state would say would be general guidelines as far as number of acres per park or per 1,000 people, the number of ball fields, number of miles of trails, and so on. But every community is unique in how they view that. So what we've been doing is just keeping a running list of other communities. It's not to say that we want to be like Valparaiso or like Avon, but it's always interesting to look at what Avon standards are or some of these other communities. So this is there more for the advisory committee's sake and for the town's sake, just to review those various components. One of the things we looked at, and again, the last study, we had of those 35 different recreational components, we acknowledged just 2 of those recreational components in the impact fee calculations. And they were land, which is park land, and also trails. And those were the 2 priorities that we had set up. Some of the logic behind that is that, you could say that we're short on ball fields and we want ball fields, but if you don't have the land to put the ball fields on, it's kind of a missed opportunity. So we want to make sure that you have enough land to accommodate those future needs of recreational components. This was one of the major changes that we changed as a committee from the last one. The last study we looked at was a standard of 5 acres per 1,000 people. And I think currently you're, even with today's standards, I'm going to get my blow up here so I can actually see it. Currently you have the standard that you have right now. If you just look at the current inventory, your standard of current level of service is 2.91 acres per 1,000. So you can see that even with the 5-acre goal the last time, it was still going to be short. We felt, and the committee had much discussion on this, that we wanted to go higher on that, and we provided different scenarios of a mixture of those standards. And it was determined by the committee that we would go with an 8 acre per 1,000 persons standard for the park acres. Now with that, you'll see in that bottom table, this is where the current deficiency and the future needs come into play. You'll see in that second column that your current acreage is 29.2 acres of land. The current, at that 8 acres per 1,000, you would need to have 80 acres, 80.3 acres of land. So you'd have a current deficiency of 51 acres and 0.1 acres of land currently. And then with the 10-year growth of population, there will be an additional need of almost 93 acres of land. So what the impact fee statute basically says that 92 acres of land can be funded by impact fees. The town and the municipality will have to figure out funding outside of impact fees, ways to grow that 51 acres of land. So this was of the two components, this was the major element of that. As I'm going through here, if you have questions, please stop me because it would make more sense. The other item, and again, you'll see this is of all of those 30-some components. The bottom two lines are the ones that were going into the impact fee, and those are the park acres, which is the very bottom line, and the second line from the bottom is trails and pathways. What we had established last time, and these again are the same two components that we studied, was part of the impact fee last time around. In this case, we looked at a standard 5 years ago for the trails of being 1 mile of trail for every 2,000 people. This one, we're looking at 1 mile of trail for every 1,750 people. So we're up in that standard from where it was last time. And with that, you would have a current efficiency of 0.66 miles of trails and a future need of almost 3 acres or 3 miles of future trails. And again, that's that component. You'll see that next line down, that current efficiency of 51.1 acres of land and future need of 92.48 acres of land. The next slide is looking at all those components and what those costs would be. I won't get into the details on this, but several times we'll look at things, and those last two columns back from the right, blue shaded columns. Well, in those cases, it looks at the current efficiency cost and the future needs cost. And the current efficiency cost, which are the green columns, if you add up all of those current efficiencies, it'd be $6.7 million. Future needs, there'd be $6.039 million of inventory. If you look at those last two items as being A priorities, you'll see in the yellow line near the bottom that there would be a current efficiency of $1.67 million and a future need of $3.39 million of future need. Going on to the next, this is where you would then break that down of what each individual line item would cost as far as an impact fee. And you'll see in that mix that if you look at those last two items, the trails would represent an impact fee of $299, and the land would represent an impact fee of $1,331. So you add those two together, that green shaded line at the bottom would add up to be $1,630 as far as the impact fee. Now, again, I noted that as a rough number because we still have to apply those deductions to that. And this actually captures that in a little bit better way, just looking at those last two. So what that's saying is that over the next 10-year period, that 1,000 or 1.6 million will have to be funded outside of using impact fee dollars. The $3.39 million will be funded by impact fees itself. And then that impact fee dollar amount would be, in rough numbers, without any deductions, would be $1,630. Those last two columns on here is interesting because you want to make sure that the town's ratio of that fee and that of the impact fee itself, you're not underwater. So in both these cases, you'll see that you look at the multi-use trails, the town will have to pay 18 cents in order to get 82 cents back. You just don't want to look at elements just the opposite of that. So that doesn't make any sense to include. Let me just go back and look at one that would even be more profound. For example, if you were looking at baseball fields, you have a current efficiency that is greater than the future need. So baseball fields, you would have you have to pay 66 cents in order to get 35 cents back. So that helps determine what is apropos to go into that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more confusing. This is how statute requires you for the municipality to outline where and how they're going to fund current efficiencies. So of those two components, and again, we're looking at trails and we're looking at park land. We're looking at some of that coming from grants, some coming from park capital improvements. Another one would be the Town Economic Development Fund. And the fourth item that we looked on this was TIF funding. So for the nature pathways and trails, we're looking at that being basically covered by grants and by park improvement capital. Park improvement capital would come from property taxes. And I'll show you how that plays into that role. In the park open space acres, we broke that down by grants, by basically all four of those elements, including TIF. And that will be important to look at because that's how we then determine the impact deductions. This page here would represent, we're looking at those current efficiencies being implemented in years 2023 and 2025. And we determine the columns that are in kind of the tan pinkish color, those would be elements that actually would be, those funding sources come from property taxes. So what the statute requires is that current deficiencies are exempt from the new folks coming in. So anybody coming in and having to pay impact fees are exempt from having to pay for current deficiencies. So what we do is then we figure out where they lie and we discount those up front. So those are the two elements at the top. The bottom table there looks at where that growth of new folks coming in would be and what their dollar amounts would be, and those would be then deducted. So we got a total impact deduction of $103,382. That comes off the impact cost, and I think that's the next slide. Yeah. So what this is a summary of is that middle table there has a bottom number there. The projected impact fee dollar amount would be $1,580. That is arrived by taking the impact cost of the $3.398 million and subtracting that impact deduction of $103,000, giving a new adjusted future needs cost of $3.295 million. Take that $3.295 million and divide it by the number of residential building permits in the next 10 years, the 2,085, and that comes up with the impact fee of $1,580. What some communities have done, and Bargersville did this in their last ordinance, is the last table there, which is an housing equivalent aspect. Typically, that $1,580 would apply to any residential building permit. Let it be a multifaceted apartment building, and it could be a one-bedroom apartment, would still pay that total amount. By applying the housing equivalent aspect on that, we prorate that accordingly based on this number of bedrooms or the components. So you see in that bottom table that $1,580 impact fee would represent the 100% amount, and that would be any single family unit, no matter what size or square footage of that facility. A duplex, basically two family or two unit attachment, would be at 95% or $1,501 impact fee. An apartment, which would maybe be a one bedroom, is 65% of that. So that would be $1,027. So it's something that actually accommodates that mix. The idea behind that is that you're going to have a different number of occupants in a single family unit than you would a one bedroom apartment. So that was some of the logic behind that. And I think the town has actually implemented that on one of your apartment developments in the last several years and two. So that was a recommendation by the Impact Fee Advisory Committee. Just for comparison's sake, these are, to the best of our knowledge, the most current impact fee ordinance dollar amounts for various municipalities. I think Carmel is the highest in the state of $2,981. Bargersville is the 1580. And then the average of those listed up above is 1346. So the summary on that is that we're looking at a one impact fee zone that basically we studied all the various components. We decided as a committee to go with the same ones we used last time, which was the trails and parkland. The rough number for the current deficiencies is the $1.673 million. That would have to be funded over the next 10 years outside of impact fees. The future needs would be, with the adjustment, would be the $3.295 million. That would generate an impact fee dollar amount of $1,580. One thing that we didn't do the impact inflation adjustment last time.
Correct.
And the recommendation is that we're going to add that, make that as part of the recommendation that each year that impact fee dollar amount would go up 3%. That's just to maintain that level of cost. And even the 3% is, with today's dollars and today's issues, is maybe even going to be short-sighted. But 3% is there. There's a graphic in the document that actually shows the Consumer Product Index, which I think in the last 4 years for the Indianapolis area was around 4 to 5%. So 3% seem to be justified to consider. We are recommending, again, to consider the housing equivalent, and that reporting on the revenues brought in and the expenditures paid out would be done on an annual basis by the town. So I think that was it. So be happy to answer any detailed questions. I think you don't necessarily make that final approval. You give a recommendation, and again, we'll go to the Plan Commission, which is where the public hearing would be held, and then the town council for a 2 reading process then too. I covered a lot of numbers, a lot of tables, a lot of small tables that you can't read. One thing I should have stated too, BAGI, which is the Builders Association of Greater Indianapolis, usually has some type of overview on this. We have fulfilled all of their criteria as far as what they require in seeing an impact fee study. We've addressed all their checkpoints.
Won't any discussion, I'll make a motion. I move that we give a favorable recommendation to the Plan Commission to approve the recreation impact fee.
Second.
All right, let me make sure I get that right. All in favor that we make a favorable recommendation of the park impact fee as is indicated in this document, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good job.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and
Awesome.
thank you for your time and input on this study.
Yeah. Thank you. This was really an interesting process, and you really get the sense of the importance of this kind of a thing from the long term, and the negative implications of not doing such a thing as well. So we're all thankful to have moved this on to the next level.
Bethany, one thing we probably should have had in my motion was resolution number 2021-02.
Got it. It's 01, but
Or,
that's okay.
well, it says 02 on this paper.
That's, I believe, the planning commission's resolution.
Oh,
So there's the
oh.
Parks Board, and then I put their resolution in for your reference as well.
Okay.
Very good. All right. let's move down on to the next item of new business, which is the landscaping maintenance scope of work. Bethany, thank you for putting this together. Much appreciated. I know we, at least I don't know if everybody else thinks the same thing, but I took an extra look at this and I did the year before last.
Very guarded
So-
this time in my review. I did see a couple places that maybe we could tighten things up a little bit.
And that's exactly what I was hoping for.
Okay. This one's just a personal preference on the weekly mowing services. Instead of using weed eat, we could use trim.
Sure.
But I would like to see on the landscape maintenance, I would like to include dates to be completed by on some of those. The spring cleanup, I think we could include a date to be completed by. The summer pruning, I think we need an actual date, and the fall cleanup. I think if we can include those, it gives a much more firm directive to the people providing the service. And that's an expectation that we would have of them, to have that completed by that date.
I had almost the same thought. My direction of it was, what if we provided a chart that we required them to submit monthly, hey, on 9/27, this was done and this was done, and that way we're tracking, and so both parties are keeping track of that. I think that's a reasonable thing to expect. I don't know if we've ever done something like that in the
Is
past.
there any process on the invoicing with that now, that they do something similar?
So I know with Restoration Landscape, who was the maintenance contractor in 2020, they put on their invoicing what was done the previous month, whereas Greenleaf this past year just made a general,
We did it.
this week, yes, we're billing for these services that we quoted, that we,
So do you think it'd be fair to ask for an itemized invoice?
That would be fair. I think that would be fair, as long as, like I said, we're just asking for a lot to do. It's somebody's cross-referencing that. That was the thought that was going through my head. Okay, how are we, where's the checks and balances?
Right.
So as long as we have a process, I feel like that would be something. And I don't know if maybe this is two different conversations, because we're talking about the quote here, and then we're talking about the process to make sure that it happens. And I sort of feel like they've kind of merged to some degree, because if there's anything that we would want to include in the quote, such as you need to do this, that might be something to include. And might actually clear this up a little bit too, if it was, I don't know. Or like you said, I mean, if it's just a matter of, we just look at the invoice and we write in the notes that says something, must be required to include all.
If I were a contractor, I might balk at the idea of completing somebody's chart,
Mhm.
just because I would hopefully have my own records keeping system for those kinds of things. But I think it's very fair to ask for an itemized invoice. If you're gonna bill us for services, tell us what those services were. And then our checks and balances could even be our weekly inspections. Was the grass cut? Were the weeds pulled? Whatever, tighten up our inspection process to confirm that what we're being billed for is actually being completed.
We're adding another thing in, but I talk about it another time. So, no, that's fair. I would certainly, my thoughts would be, I would agree with that if we ask for a detailed invoice of the services that were provided, then that would maybe cross that and help us to keep track that what we're saying in here is in fact what's happening.
That's what I did the year before, was the other one is look at what they build and look at the bid, what they bid to see if.
I think that's very fair. And also, I'd like to see, I think it was Bethany that may have mentioned at a previous discussion of putting a sign out saying, landscape maintenance provided by. Just make that a requirement of the contract, that you provide that sign in each area, not just in one part, but each area should have that, so that there's some accountability there. And even with the lawn mowing contract, so one could be for landscape and one mowing services provided by. And those were my recommendations on the quotes.
I was curious about, let's keep jumping in, feel free to. I was curious, what was the thought process about getting the horseshoe bed and you know, because so I looked at the timing of in the Windish Park, it's, you know, we're stating the bed edging, we're talking about the bed care. This is going out when? January? When are we sending this out? December?
December, January, whenever we get approval for the final scope of work.
So you see what I'm saying? So if somebody's gonna bid on, I mean, because that's a pretty good sized bid. We would just say, hey, just assume that is not gonna be part of it.
Well, right now, that's not part of it.
That was my understanding, was that it would not be part of the scope of work because it will be removed.
Okay.
And just for your
Do
reference.
they drive out and, I mean, how does it work? Do they-
I don't know. I've never
Oh,
done a quote for a landscaping company.
They come out and look at, most of them come out and look at it, because I know some of them before have made some recommendations. One is Switzer that the retention area needed reseeded.
Yeah.
So I know, you know, they made different comments, so I know most of them come out and look at it.
Okay. So there's not really a need, because it's kind of on them to some degree, whether or not they're gonna come out and take a look at it and see if there's a giant bed that they have to take care of.
I think we would, I mean, out of fairness to them in their quote, make sure that they understand that that won't be part of their scope of work, the maintenance of that.
I was wondering if you wanted me to come up with an introductory letter, just kind of saying things like having the itemized invoices, just FYI, this bed will not be in place. So that was something else that I was considering putting together, and just thought we'd start here and go from there.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay.
That makes sense.
You know, I've got several. One on the playground mulch. It says, right now, install play mulch to a depth of no less than 9 inches. That should be to maintain no less than 9 inches. Because we're not wanting to put in 9 inches.
Okay.
And at Switzer Park, according to our safety inspection, there's only 6 inches of mulch there. So that needs to be everything removed to excavated to a 9-inch depth and completely filled with new mulch to comply with the safety regulations.
You're talking about when, I'm trying to remember his name now. What was the guy's name that came out to look at it? I know what you're talking about, does, back in summer,
Yeah.
The park safety
the
inspector.
park safety inspector.
I'm sorry, was that Windish Park?
Switzer.
Switzer.
Windish and Witt Park, those, when we put the new playgrounds, we went in and put all new mulch in.
I don't have that. So you're saying that, I'm trying to get with you, so to excavate down, to make sure, because he was saying that we only had 6 right now.
Correct. So that takes 6 inches of existing mulch and another 3 inches of soil out
And then refill.
and refill it.
So would there be another option to excavating and maybe adding a layer of whatever is currently surrounding that to bring it up to the height that it needs to be? Is there, it seems like there's rubber barriers around there now?
Furlough ties.
That's that's
Oh,
the
those are
containment
railroad
unit, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter if we're excavating, right? If we're going down, it would still be 9
Right.
inches.
Yeah. But
So-
I was thinking of, instead of excavating, building up to the
It'd be,
containment and then putting the mulch on top of what's already there.
I see. So getting new barriers.
Well, that'll affect the playground equipment too, though.
Either way, it probably affect the playground.
Well, no, if you go
Yeah.
down 9 and bring it back up to where it's at now,
Should be, yeah.
it'd be the same.
Actually, if we do that, I think we ought to look at, the height of those swings too, and some of that other equipment, if we're gonna,
Well, there's no swings in Switzer.
yeah. But looking to make sure that it's all, the right height that it should be. Some of those are too,
Well, he didn't mention that in his safety report, that
Right.
everything there.
I'm just trying to think that slide when you come out of, there's a big divot there, isn't there?
Well, that's just for use,
Yeah.
every time someone goes through there, it
Yeah,
kicks it out, like under the swings, it divots out
right.
where they push off.
But if you
don't
go
have
down,
that.
so what I'm saying is though, that even if what if you go down, 6 inches and then put 9 inches on top, so that it won't kick out as much.
It'll still kick out under the impact points.
Yeah. And is that something that would go out in this, or would that be a separate?
I think that has to be a separate, job.
If you do it separate, then you need to take the playground mulch off of this on Switzer. Because there's no sense in putting
A little bit.
Couple
We're
inches
gonna
is
cut it all
an
out.
inch or two of new on and
Yeah.
digging it out.
Is that excavating, would that be I'm just throwing it out here, is that something that we could loop in with the bed excavation? At Windish? I don't know, if we're digging.
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Of course, there's gonna be quite a bit of handwork around the playground equipment.
Yeah.
so that might be more than we can chew. How would we do that? I'm just wondering, would it make sense if we reached out to the safety inspector to see if the safety inspector had a recommendation on the process to get it to 9 inches? Or if they would have that, an idea on that, whether, Rhonda's proposal makes sense. Again, the challenge with that would be, okay, now we're gonna dig that hole even deeper, right, without raising all the playground equipment up, or do you dig? I don't know the answer to that, so I'm wondering if we don't reach out to that safety inspector before we make this decision to see if he has any idea on that, because I'm betting that, I would venture to say that the guys with the landscaping crew would probably not have any idea on the best way to do that either. And I think they'd be happy to dig a hole and pull it out, but
Well, a lot of them, deal with that or playtime.
So I think for the purposes of the discussion of the landscape quote, we remove the mulch in Switzer off the quote, knowing that we will have to do some work there.
And unless the inspector says that, well, I guess what your point is that we would either way, we would separate that. Like we would either have
Yes, because then any mulch that would be needed would be
tied to
in that
project.
job.
Julie, that's something that playtime probably do.
We'd have to ask.
I'm not sure. Without knowing what the solution is, I'm not,
Yeah,
I don't know who the vendor would be to do that solution.
okay, so you just want to remove it for now?
Pardon me?
Just remove it for now?
I would say remove it for now until we. Is that something that the town could do, is dig those out if we decide to do that? Or do we need an outside source?
Don't know
Okay.
if our guys can do that, given the constraints of the equipment.
Right.
Okay,
We
well,
have
I
no idea what
recommend that we
supports
just remove
underneath or
the,
what type of.
Right.
yeah.
And that's what makes me nervous about
Right.
the landscaping company either. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we can do that by consensus.
what's that?
Remove the
Remove
clay
it by
mulch from the
consensus.
play area off the Switzer quote.
Yes.
Okay, now another thing I've got at Switzer on the summer flowers. It's this, installation of 6 flats. That's 6 flats was based when the area from the sign to the shrubs was all mulched in there to the street. Now there's only a small area mulched around the sign.
That's up to you all to change. I was going based off of what was there.
I know, and I've done that, that's what I did last year too. But that, probably ought to put that down to 1 flat.
Which one was this again? I'm sorry.
Switzer, summer flowers. There's just that little area of mulch under the sign, and you're not gonna get 6 flats in there.
How many is in the
Isn't there an
flat? I have
area
no idea.
by
About
the,
34.
there's
Oh my
also a small area by the rule sign too.
Yeah, there hasn't been any there before, that's kind of small.
Yeah,
Mulch area used to go from the bushes to the road.
right. I think 1 flat would be a little skimpy, but maybe 2
Who's the right?
would be okay in there.
And one other thing I had was at Wendish on this summer annuals. There's, service includes labor and materials to create beautiful summer arrangements displaying color density, flowers around the park entrance. In the past, they've also had them around the rule sign.
I did include that too. So maybe we need to specify two different amounts for each, or
Well,
an
no,
amount for each
it-
area
Well, in the past, we just did 8 flats and they
divided.
divided it up. Because there's only so much room around the park sign. That's all I have.
I think if we up the flats to 10 flats and have them divided between the 2 areas, That should be sufficient. Do you think so, Linda?
I think so.
In this picture, you can see some of the
Yeah.
hours
They're
there.
kind of sparse this year.
And I don't think they were watered either.
Okay. Anybody have any other adjustments? So we'll take this back, get another draft, that's, we'll go from there. We'll revisit at the next meeting then the revised, is that fair? Okay. Anything else on the scope of work? All right, that takes us to our master plan update. Julie, do you have a master plan update for us?
I can always give you an update on the master plan.
Okay.
So we are currently in the process of seeking community engagement, and there's a survey to collect your thoughts and input on what you would like to see in this master plan. So we'll make sure that you have that survey link and that we can share that and get as much input as possible. We've already done the key stakeholder interviews, and then done some other, we did the farmer's market, kind of that engagement. So now we're doing this third touch point of engagement to gather input, and that'll kind of make up, along with our demographic analysis and kind of our background research, sort of our data points to go forward and then make recommendations on where we go forward. That's kind of where we are in that. And we'd love to have lots of surveys completed, so that's an online survey.
And you'll be sending us the link for
I'll
that?
send you the link.
Okay.
Meant to do that earlier today, and holiday got away from it, so.
Julie, is that something that Laura could,
She will be
Publicize,
posting, and it'll be on
Social
the
media.
utility bills that are going,
Oh, good.
so we'll
5 cents off?
If you participate, you save 5 cents on your bill.
don't get to control that.
Very cool. Excellent.
5 cents on your bill, it's going way up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, we got off track there, but very good. I like that. That's awesome. And so then that data will be gathered, and then the next
And then
step.
the next step, once we kind of gather all that, will be for the committee to get together and digest it all and come up with what the recommendations are and how what's the future look like for the Parks and Rec
Yeah.
in that master plan.
Are we thinking data collection from a month, a couple months, or?
I think the survey is gonna be open for, another couple weeks.
Okay.
So then we'll, hopefully get together. It's always tough to get a committee together between Thanksgiving and Christmas and find a good date to meet. Just honestly, it's a challenge.
Sure.
So I doubt that we'll have all the recommendations before January. Just logistically, it's challenging.
Mhm. Okay. Awesome. Very good. We look forward to that information. Very good. Okay, let's move into the budget. Past that item there.
I have no questions.
Anybody have anything on the budget? Looks good. Anything for any other bids? Anybody want to bring anything up?
I got one quick thing for Julie. Is the new bid's been sent out for Kip Art.
So, Park has been, so we are, I'll say revising the phases. And so we have, we are not going to rebid the phase as it was before.
Yeah, I know you explained that last meeting, said you're gonna do new bids, and I didn't know they'd been sent out yet.
Yeah, so we are essentially, I'll say, we're focusing on accelerating activity. That fair for those of you who've been into meetings? And so what we're looking to do is help early next year to have some items ready to go out to bid, and then there'll be another bid that'll go out later towards the summer. But we're looking at playground equipment, splash pad in those later phases, but initially looking at more trails, parking lot, and kind of laying groundwork, some pickleball courts.
Yay.
So kind of focusing on, I'll say, the western half of the property initially, and really trying to focus on those items in the next 18 to 24 months. Is that the time frame? So
I
that,
think there's hopes to start moving dirt pretty quickly.
so yeah, hoping to move dirt and kind of start that first phase and get, but we kind of have a little subcommittee that meets monthly, and we're working with Crossroads and Shrewsbury to get plans going and out, and so
Yeah.
we kind of not bidding the exact same package, but we've kind of taken pieces and expanded it.
Are they still, you're still gonna consolidate the Kip Art with the White Pine Trail, or that's separate now?
Now we're gonna separate it because we are unlikely to have the same efficiencies given what we're adding to Kephart. And then
Thank you much. Anything else before we adjourn? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
You adjourn.